All right, let's try that again. Problem fixed. Yeah, I hope people are understanding why we've decided to continue with the theme with the counting of the Omer, so to speak, because if we're still in this time period, post-Shavuot, prophetically speaking, then the understanding of the spring appointed times, especially as it deals with the counting of the Omer and Shavuot, is very important because a message is being proclaimed. A message that someone or something is coming is to be proclaimed. And so, yeah, it's such an exciting. I was getting so pumped during the teaching, and I know that people are starting to go, oh, does this relate to this? And does this relate to that? And you're probably correct. And we'll probably tackle that later in the series, but we'll see what comes out today and direct it accordingly. Hang on, let me open this up. Okay, well, I guess we'll just kick off with the questions. Hey, Curtis. Mm-hmm. I will go with Kyle and Kelsey, since you guys put your hand up first, it would seem.
I think it might have been Teresa, but Shabbat Shalom, guys.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom.
So Ezra here has the first question. I may or may not follow up, but it's really Ezra Nava that has the question. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Good to see you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah, welcome back.
Yeah, likewise.
So I guess I'm failing to make a connection of some sort with, I guess, the logical side of Abraham in play of like where he plays into the covenant, where Yah walks through, or the torch goes through the pieces. Mm-hmm. Because I guess in my head I'm thinking, okay, so if he's in a deep sleep, or if he didn't go through, then how does he play a part into this covenant if that's what was required to fulfill, like to make it a covenant?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in its simplicity, Yah is making the covenant with Abram or Abraham. Like, he's not making it with anyone else. The passing through the pieces was essentially the signing on the dotted line, as it were. And so what's going on there? It's not that the covenant is not made with Abram. What that's telling you is that there's only one party that's actually taking the accountability and responsibility and any consequences that may come thereof from breaking that covenant, right? So Yah's still entering into covenant with Abram or Abraham, but he's saying, I'm the one that's taking charge of this. I'm the one who's taking accountability, responsibility, and I will pay the consequence. But I'm still in covenant with you in its simplest form.
Yeah. I guess one more thing is,
just to add to that as well, I should have maybe elucidated a bit more on this, but Abraham was asleep, a type and shadow of death. This is actually where it goes back to the garden, because, first of all, Adam was put in a deep sleep and the rib was pulled out and the woman was fashioned. Again, a typology of death. But going back to Abraham, he's essentially saying the reason I have to do this is because you're dead. You are, like, remember, we're all dead men and women walking right now. Now, this is where it ties back to the garden indirectly. Could Adam redeem Eve? Does mankind have the ability to redeem itself from sin and death? No, it doesn't. King David would say, how does man redeem himself from death? Because when you understand the laws of redemption, it takes one greater to redeem the one that is lesser. man cannot redeem man. David would say that the cost of redemption is great indeed. Well, yes, it is. Like a fallen human being cannot redeem another fallen human being because both are fallen. It takes an unfallen human being to redeem a human being. And like, let me throw this in there. This is why Elohim had to come in the flesh, because it has to be like that redeems like. The laws of redemption are clear in the shadow picture that only family members can redeem a person. This is why in Hebrews it says that he had to become the firstborn among many brothers. He had to take on the likeness of man so that he could redeem man. You know, how is Yah says, I will redeem you. Here's the problem. According to Torah, only a man can redeem a man. But then we've got the problem of the fall. A fallen man can't redeem a man, but a sinless man. Now we've got leverage for redemption. Do you see how powerful and it is stunning? It is stunning. So going back to the cutting of the covenant with Abraham, Yah's saying, I'm going to take care of this. In fact, I'm the only one that can take care of this. Why? Because you're fallen and you're dead.
It's a great question for the series in all of this. But what we have to remember is because of what falls under redemption and the protocols under it, what you're seeing is the establishment of a seed identity. And that identity must be within family. So this is why it would become the house of Israel from this seed. You actually see what Messiah is actually doing. So it's a family member. Mm-hmm. It's literally he's creating or identifying the house. And this is why seed is going to play a very important part to understanding this, because he's literally showing us through these parts of the shadow picture. And how it relates back right to the garden is actually stunning. And what he's doing right through to the renewal of this with what we call, the Brit Hadashah. So you're seeing something that not only points to the deity of Messiah, but it points to the ultimate hand of Elohim truly taking full responsibility for the creation and the test we're in. And so this is why an identity crisis is so huge. If we don't know who we are, and if we don't understand the very literal nature of the test in all of this, we will break this thing all up. And indeed, this is what theology has done. And we'll talk more about this really at Sukkot. But it's incredible where this really leads to. And so the adversary is always trying to chop everything up, put things into its little silos and do little things. And yet Elohim changes not, and he's trying to bring everything into one in restoration. So you're seeing this incredible dynamic of an adversary wanting to divide, and you're seeing Elohim's great plan of redemption, which is complete restoration. Total, not just a little bit, complete. But it's achieved something at the end of it. And of course, we'll speak more about that later this year. But it's a very, 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 very good question. But it really is going to relate to understanding seed. And Michael's going to cover this and continue to develop on that in this series.
Because, by the way, this ties into what's commonly known as the fullness of the Gentiles, another chopping up. I don't know if people picked up on it, but it's right there in Jacob's blessing. He'll become a multitude of nations. Well, in the English translation, in the New Testament, they've turned that into the fullness of the Gentiles. And Paul's actually speaking, he's going right back to those promises. But we're getting towards the end of the series there. So
it's a great question, but it's going to take a little bit of diving into to fully answer it.
We were talking a little bit about the death nature, the type and shadow that you brought up, the sleep, and how Ezra said something like, it's almost like in our death, the covenant is established or made made real, and in his death it's fulfilled. Like there's this I don't know. There's a lot there that seems to be going on, as you alluded to.
It seems like there's a lot more in the fact that he was in a deep sleep, because deep sleep usually always is related to death.
I was thinking about a father. Like, I've got a 1-year-old at home, and I watch him sleep sometimes, and I just, there's a nature of, I want to take full responsibility for that son of mine, for these children of mine. Yet my other son is 11, getting older. There's a bond forming where I want to actually I want to teach him the covenant. I want to make an agreement with him, but I'm still his father, and I want to take responsibility for providing, caring for, and like nurturing that in him. I don't know if that's what kind of came to mind when I thought about.
What's interesting? You mentioned about that death is required. Like, let's throw this in there. But Romans chapter 7, regarding the laws of marriage, right? The marriage covenant was annulled, and there was the divorce that happened, right? And we know that a covenant is firm while someone is alive, but it's in death that you can be released from that. Well, everyone says, oh, well, Messiah died, right? Thus he could remarry. Everyone misses the fact that we have to die as well. So that, as Paul would say, we can be raised anew, a spiritual virgin, because the high priest can only marry a virgin, right? And so, yes, death is required. And then bring in what Messiah says, a seed has to die. Then it brings forth much fruit, right?
And that relates into the living sacrifice component, which Paul would draw on. And we'd become a living sacrifice. A part of that living sacrifice is dying to self in this picture, and then we will physically actually die. So there's an incredible sort of picture here that aligns with, what he's actually establishing in this great plan of redemption. But he's showing us right from the bat. He's taking full responsibility and accountability and consequence for the test he has created for us all to experience.
One more quick thing then, related to Safar and proclaim, count. So I quickly thought, when you were laying all that out, of Yeshua reading Isaiah 61 and proclaiming the Jubilee. But then I looked it up, and that proclaim is not the same word. But it's interesting. He is proclaiming the release, the Jubilee, the 50, the counting, and it just, maybe there's a connection there that I don't see. But I thought of that. I looked at it, and it didn't have the same word. But I don't know if it's a synonym or not. But it just kind of.
With word studies, a word study is great, but then people get stuck on the word, and they forget that words have synonyms, which are different words that have the same semantic meaning. And so, like today, we saw that you have safar, but you also have manah. There's also another word called madad. And so, but they have semantic overlap. And for the sake of this series, we're pulling on the Safar thread, right? I could bring in the other ones, and a couple of times in the series there'll be mention of other ones. But regarding the proclaiming in Isaiah, kara. So to proclaim the acceptable year of Yah, the word there is kara, which is where the word mikra comes from. Mikra kodesh, a set apart, calling unto gathering. But then to proclaim, you can have the word basar, which is where the word good news comes from, right? To proclaim the good news. So I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes this is why I use the phrase thematic connection. Like you can have two words that thematically basically identical, like safar and manah, which have a huge semantic overlap. And you'll see the same with proclaim, right? There'll be several words to call out. There's one to shout, this idea of to announce, to give the good news. Like they all have semantic overlap. So, this is where we have to not. Yes, word studies are fantastic, but at the same time, we don't want to be blinkered by them either. This is why understanding thematic connection is critical in biblical study, because if not, you're only getting like 20% of the message. Yeah.
In times, in moments, depending on how the Hebrew is being used. Greek, not as much, but.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Well, we hope that helps.
Hey, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. And yeah, I'm sure we'll see you all in a couple of days, remembering, celebrating Derek's life, and just appreciate that you all are able to be right there with Nick and the community. It's wonderful to know that they're being upheld by such a great community. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. But Shabbat Shalom to you and the family. Thanks for the great question.
And to Ezra. Well, I guess Ezra's basically part of the family.
Ezra, we'll keep him in there. Shabbat Shalom to you all.
He's being grafted in.
Exactly.
Let's go with Teresa. I've asked you to unmute there, Teresa. Oh, hang on. There we go.
Okay. Well, my question was similar, I think, to Ezra's. And I'm still confused with the message, because I guess I always thought that a covenant was like a contract, and a contract is between two parties. So I'm still there. I can't. I'm not getting it. And so to me, my question was going to be, what did, usually each party decides they're going to perform something in this covenant. It's about a performance. Yeah. Now we know what Yah was going to perform, and that, he was going to multiply Abraham's seed. He was going to have a son of promise. That was Yah's performance of this covenant. But what was Abraham? What did Abraham agree to perform in this covenant?
That is a fantastic question. And the answer is actually given to us. When Yah first shows up to Abraham, I think it's like Genesis 12 or 13, he says, Abram, walk before me and be perfect. The word there for perfect is tam, which is where tamim comes from. And when you get into the Hebrew understanding of it, it's walk before me with integrity, grow up, mature, become, overcome, all tied in, sincerity, integrity, without hypocrisy. And that's Yah's statement right off the bat. Abram at the time, walk before me and be tam, be perfect. The word tam and tamim can also mean without spot or blemish, used of the sacrifices that were to be offered in the Levitical priesthood. So now that's the shadow picture, the sacrifices without spot or blemish. We know that spiritually speaking is to clean up our garments so that our garments do not have spot or wrinkle or blemish. Hence, the bride prepares her garments. And so do we see that? Well, today we saw a verse which was a confirmation that Abram did walk before Yah with integrity, because he says to Isaac, I'm going to establish the covenant I made with your father, with you, because he walked before me, he obeyed my voice, he did all these things, he listened to my instruction, therefore. And so that's the simplicity of your answer. But you answered your other question by yourself, because you said, I'm struggling to understand.
Here's my next question. Both of them perform, well, not at the time, but Abraham kept his word. So how could Yeshua have suffered the consequences of that broken promise with Abraham?
Well, did Abraham keep it perfectly? I read of quite a few times in Torah where he fell short several times. And so right there, you're actually seeing Abram, yes, you did a good job, but you still fell short.
Okay. All right. It's just that I didn't read any record, any place that Abraham, unlike the children of Israel, actually agreed, because the children of Israel in the wilderness at Mount Sinai said, hey, we agree to this, we agree to these terms, we will do it. I don't see any record in scripture of Abraham literally, where it's recorded that he says, I agree to these terms and we know what they are. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the
So
fact
that makes it hard.
Yeah, so not everything. Let me rephrase this. We can see by virtue of Abram's actions that he did take this on. Because if not, he wouldn't be bugging Yah about where's this seed you've promised me, right? The fact that he's walking out and we see record tells us that he must have made an agreement. Just because it's not recorded for us doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Nor that he didn't have the understanding. But the point that's being made is that I'm the one and the only one that can actually fulfill this. And so this is why the disciples will go on later in the Brit to, not by works alone and all these sorts of things, because this is what man sets out to do. We try to take our little performance boxes and, we've chopped the covenant into all these kinds of different sections. And what's actually being shown here, undeniably, regardless of what Abraham knew or didn't, and same with Adam, for that matter, I'm doing it. I'm the only one that can. And so,
I agree with that.
Yeah. And so there's a joy and comfort in that. Or else we're all going to face, Therese, let's be honest.
We're in trouble.
We're on a performance contract as opposed to a covenant promised and delivered and fulfilled by Elohim. Take your pick. If we go down the performance contract, welcome to religion in all its various formats, and things like that. But he still needed to articulate this covenant. And we see this at Sinai. And you're right. It wasn't recorded with Abraham, but it was most certainly at Sinai when this seed and the promise of this seed had come to that point. And now he's going to tell them who they are. And now he's now going to spell out some things regarding this thing. And so it's an incredible picture. But ultimately, if we don't accept Messiah, we're done. We are actually done. And what Michael was mentioning today in the teaching, particularly to Abraham, it's actually a great joy if we get it. Unless we think we haven't fallen short. If we think we can do it another way. So this is a part of this teaching series and this journey, and something that has a great picture again, but we won't elaborate on that until the teachings around Sukkot. But it relates to all of this.
Okay, I have one other question too. It may not sound like it ties in, but you were talking about the counting of the Omer, and the counting of the Omer is up into Pentecost. And so maybe that there, I don't understand that either for the purpose of that, but I thought that was for the purpose of the Spirit. Now, you teach that has been fulfilled. And so maybe I'm misunderstanding, because there are others that believe, based on 2 Corinthians 1:21 and 22, where the last portion of it says that the Spirit, he has put his Spirit in our hearts as a deposit. It's only a deposit. It wasn't the total fulfillment. So based on that, has it really been fulfilled?
Let me phrase it this way. The plan of redemption, it is a good question. People say, are we in the new covenant? Are we not? The way I always say it is the plan of redemption is going to come to a climax point. And that climax point is when the millennial reign is fulfilled, the great white throne judgment occurs, and eternity begins. That's the grand climax. That's it. There's nothing more.
That's fulfillment.
Now, along the way, we see, as we get closer and closer to that climax, we see within time these events occurring. This is why you see things like, even though an appointed time is fulfilled, you see it show up again. You know, does that mean that, like Curtis says, it doesn't mean fulfilled, now we're over and done with it. That doesn't mean the appointed times are no longer important. They're living. And so, like, for example, we believe that the Great Trib will start on a Pesach and leavened bread. I believe we see events that I personally pin to Shavuot that occur in the Great Tribulation. Yah still works by his appointed times. It's just that there's a fulfillment in regards to this plan of redemption. Like, just to finish my train of thought, the fall appointed times will be fulfilled. There's still going to be another 1,000 years. And my understanding is that the great white throne judgment will occur on a Yom Kippur. But it was fulfilled 1,000 years prior. Do you see what I mean? Like, doesn't mean it's done and dusted. But what you're seeing is that we're going closer and we're going towards that climax. You know, this is why when people get caught up with new covenant, old covenant, it's like, no, we're heading towards the grand climax. And once that's done, then all will be finished. You know, the full appointed times will be fulfilled. But you read in Revelation that after the great white throne judgment, then the statement said, now it is done.
No.
Just because the full appointed times were fulfilled, we still had 1,000 years to go. And and it's when that grand climax occurs, then the words, now it is finished, you know. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that helped me, Teresa, was when I understood that all his promises and the covenant this is why his appointed times all speak of him, and that shows we often call it the great plan of redemption. And you're seeing that ultimate fulfillment at the very end. But along the way, you must have the fulfillment of the parts of it in order for the fulfillment to continue. So it has to stay living. So for instance, like again, in our Western sort of Greek mindset, kind of like, okay, that's done. Now what? Or let's move on. Where the Hebraic thinking is, no, you can't actually be living unless you're seeing fulfillment towards the great fulfillment. So when we're saying that he fulfilled the Pesach, and we're saying that is correct. However, that fulfillment now needs the other parts to be fulfilled to get to the final fulfillment. None of it and all of it, every time this happens, becomes living. Even the last great day or the final reign of Messiah, all of those appointed times in the great plan of redemption are now all living. And it's only at the very end of that it is now complete. So fulfillment doesn't necessarily state completeness or the oneness. And this is where we get, it's our Western thinking. And I used to fall into this trap too. Not trap, but
I better write that down. Fulfillment does not equal
completion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I remind myself of those things.
Yeah,
okay.
well, I do. Well, I do all the time because we do it. And sometimes our language, we're not speaking the language we know even sometimes because we're so used to saying something. But when we get a chance to do this, we can review all of that. And
let me give you a very simple shadow picture to help you understand fulfillment versus completion and stuff. When you let's say you have a recipe for a cake, right? You go through the steps, you follow the Torah of the recipe, and out comes a cake. You fulfilled it. But does that mean now that recipe is dead? Does that mean there's not anything more after it? You may make the cake again, things like that. So just because it's fulfilled doesn't mean it's either done away with or that there's not yet more to come. You may make another cake, and yeah, I found that kind of helps with the idea because, again, in the Greek Western mindset, people think fulfilled means done away with. And it's like, no, the recipe of the cake, I'm going to use it multiple times, especially if it's a good one, right? And so you see these fulfillments that bring about, you're bringing a great dinner party together, right? Let's say you're hosting a big meal. You're going to get multiple things that need to be fulfilled to bring about this great gathering of the dinner party.
Let me take Michael's example on the cake, because it's a good example. But a cake has a recipe, right? It has a recipe.
Okay.
So here's the great recipe of the great cake. The first start of that recipe might be 2 cups of flour. Once you've put those 2 cups of flour in, that's fulfilled. But now the rest of the ingredients are coming. Do you see without that flour?
Okay, that's a better probably way to go, because my mind went someplace else. I thought, okay.
So as you keep adding the ingredients or fulfilling the cake recipe, you're going to come to a point where it's complete.
The recipe is
correct. The recipe,
got it.
Got it.
There'll be flour, then some butter, then some eggs, then some kneading.
There'll be a pesach. There'll be unleavened. There'll be shallow. There'll be.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. We all have this challenge though, and I often hear that all the time. You know, and it's like, it's just. Our way of understanding and expressing was a little bit different than the ancient Hebrew cultures. And so sometimes our English sounds at odds, but it's more the understanding that matters.
Yeah.
Imagine this
Thank
as
you, guys.
a teaching series, The Great Recipe of the Time Domain.
It is. It's a great plan of redemption. And it's an incredible recipe. Thank goodness we have a righteous chef.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. Right. Last, but definitely not least, Donald.
Shalom.
You get to eat the cake.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Donald.
Shabbat Shalom, Donald.
Shabbat Shalom. I was kind of going to piggyback off of Ezra's question about the covenant made between Abraham and Yah. But then Michael said something that made me think about a covenant made between, and interestingly enough, in the changing of name, there's very thematical between not Abraham, but Adam and Hawa. That whenever she was taken from his side, there was split pieces there. And then what I found interesting was he called her Isha, and it wasn't until after the fall that then he called her Hawa.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking even further back is in creation. Is not Yah taking his spirit and breathing it into life itself, not a splitting of the pieces.
Okay. You're asking some interesting questions for which even this series is not going to fully get into, but we will bring that kind of a question into the Sukkot teachings. But you have to go through certain understandings and re-understand things. Like we were just discussing with Teresa, we have to understand, because if not, we will take a covenant, break it up into all these bits, which is what theology has done. Noah covenant, the Adamic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, the the new covenant. It's just, and it's like, apparently he's changed 6 times according to theology. Yet I read scripture and says he changes not. So we have to contend.
A renewed covenant, continuously renewed. The seed is it's renewed.
Yeah. And so that's why if we look at, again, there's these things. Suddenly in a lot of Christianity, it's the new covenant. And so everything that's before, it's this brand new thing. But if you actually understand what it's saying in the Greek, and so most certainly in the Hebrew, renewed, well, then you have to start asking yourself, what's been renewed? And so was it the Mosaic? Was it the Adamic? Was it the Abraham? You see, if you've chopped this all up, you've got a problem. And then you can only go back to the last one, and then you can start bringing in all sorts of things. Basically, we'll start removing the recipe of the cake. We will actually start taking this out and then expect the cake to look good. And it doesn't. We need to understand what we're looking at from a position of it actually going into, in the Greek, would be telos, to actually getting to completion. What we've done is we've been removing ingredients. We've been doing all sorts of stuff. You're asking a very deep question, but we have to go through a foundation in order for it to even make sense to answer it, Donald. Okay, like, do you understand? Like, this is something we have to really understand, because we're revisiting so much leaven, theology, stuff that's coming off both sides of the river, both from what's contaminated Judah and what's contaminated Christianity. And so it's kind of a big discussion, and it's why he wants us to hunger and thirst and to understand this. The main thing is we don't want to be at odds with what it says. Then we can start to understand the why. You're kind of asking a why question right now, whether you're intending to or not, because you're picking up on something. Yeah. But it's almost like it's pretty difficult. You're asking us something that requires, a lot to contend with to actually even give remotely a suffice answer. This, but you did pick up on something very, very important.
Yeah, because, and we'll get through this in Sukkot, or try to, but I made this statement: did it really begin with Abraham? Because if Yah changes not, right? And so, but here's the thing: in the chopping up of the word that religion has done, the chopping up of the covenant, they've essentially gone, here's a pile of flour and cocoa powder, eat your cake and enjoy it. How's that going? Because they've chopped out everything else, right? Many of you are hungering and thirsting because you've just been eating piles of flour and cocoa powder, and it's not been that nourishing to the soul. We've all gone through this. And so, yeah, hopefully this will help us understand, as we go through this series, start piecing some pieces together and really giving us an appreciation for the complete plan of redemption, not parts of it.
Yeah. Yeah. The moment we don't understand that fulfillment equals living is the moment we will chop it up. And so we kind of almost demand it in reverse sometimes, depending on what side of the theology equation you're on. But he's actually not. He's saying, just don't play with the recipe. Don't just, well, I'm going to do this. Don't worry. I'm the chef. When you're a master in the kitchen like me, Donald.
I was going to say the same thing that Jamie Christopher just put into the chat. Is don't add or take away from the recipe.
If we don't learn to laugh at ourselves along the way, we're in real trouble. But anyway, it's a great thing you captured, you picked up. Yeah. And we'll be pulling on that thread probably the rest of our time in the time domain to some degree. But yeah, you might just have to hold off a little bit on, just because it's difficult. But the Ruach showed you something for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So pull.
Thank you, brothers. I appreciate the encouragement.
Yeah.
Thank
Bless you, brother.
Well, I can say that next week we're going to start looking at Manhu. Who is he? Some of you that saw the Shavuot teaching will have an idea of where this is going.
Look what Jamie's pointed out here. It's a great way to finish. Don't add or take away. And this is...
My wife has found out the hard reason when baking, what happens when you add or take away. Baking is a very precise art that's very structured. I've learned the hard way, and welcome to religion, and there's a reason why Yah says don't add or take away. Because if we do, we're actually creating him in our own image.
Yeah. I think one thing we can all understand and agree that we all get it. He's going to complete his plan of redemption. Amen. We all can get that. And the fact that it takes fulfilling things along the way to complete it is a part of us understanding his truth and his ways. And that leads us to the why of it all. And so, but we can all meet here at this point and go, he's going to complete his plan of redemption, his promise. And we know that. So then all we're doing is looking at understanding something, perhaps without all the baggage in the house. And the only way that that's going to change is we have to repent. We get back to understanding our identity. We get back to understanding he's actually doing this, whether we understand it or not, whether we agree or not, whether we choose to repent or not. It's Elohim is not subject to any of us. He made himself subject to himself with Abraham, which Michael touched on today. And all I can say is praise our King for that, that it's not subject to me in my walk, or Michael in his walk, or any of you in your walk. This is very, very good news. Extremely good news, unless we're deluded, in my opinion.
Sounds like the gospel. We'll get on to that. What is to be proclaimed? Oh, I'm so excited.
We get all excited about this. You know, I don't know, all of you do too. That's the great thing about this community is that, you know, it makes it so rewarding, even to do Q&A and, you know, and to be together and to, you know, it's just an honor. It really is. He's helping us all right now.
Amen to that. Well, with that, let's do the Hebrew blessing. Yah will bless you, and he will guard you. Yah will shine his countenance upon you, and he will be gracious to you. Yah will turn his countenance towards you, and he will grant you shalom. Everyone, have a blessed rest of your Shabbat. Can't wait to continue down this series, and it's good to be back.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.